Welcome back, citizens of the rising era. You have returned to the frequency of absolute truth because the world outside is dissolving into a curated hallucination of order. This is the architect speaking. We have successfully completed the fortification of Phase 2, and in Transmission 11, we declared the official commencement of the sovereign offensive. But an offensive without a defined destination is merely chaotic energy spent in a void. To dominate, you must possess. To possess, you must occupy. Today, we define the singular, most critical objective of Phase 3, the hunter's territory. For generations, you were conditioned to believe that territory is something granted by a state, recognized by a deed, and protected by a central police force. You were taught to be a tenant of the system, renting your life, your labor, and your very thoughts from a centralized authority that views you as a harvestable asset. This is the first lie of the Matrix. In this 12th transmission, we are dismantling the illusion of the tenant and installing the reality of the sovereign landlord. Territory is not a gift from a dying regime. It is a strategic extraction from the fraying edges of a collapsing reality. Your territory is the physical and digital manifestation of your will. If your will does not occupy space, you are a phantom haunting a burning house. The geopolitics of 2026 are no longer defined by the lines on a map, but by the density of autonomy. The centralized structures that once seemed eternal, the global financial networks, the national border regimes, and the regulatory leviathans, are all undergoing a process of structural liquefaction. They are melting under the pressure of unpayable debt and the friction of internal contradictions. When a massive system begins to liquefy, it does not leave a vacuum, it leaves behind power pocket. These are areas of life where the system's signal has become weak, where its enforcement is too expensive, and where its laws have lost their moral and practical gravity. The common man sees these gaps and feels terror. He looks for a new master to tell him where to stand. The sovereign alpha, however, looks at these gaps and sees a hunter's territory. He understands that the era of seeking permission is over. This transition requires a total psychological amputation. You must cut away the part of your consciousness that waits for a license to exist. The failing system uses words like unauthorized, unregulated, and illegal to guard the exits of its digital and physical prisons. But a hunter knows that in the raw wild, there is no such thing as a permit to survive. There is only the capacity to hold ground. Your territory begins exactly where the system's ability to monitor, tax, and control you ends. If you are huddling in a high-density urban center surrounded by smart grid sensors and digital currency tracking, you have no territory. You are captive in a high-tech corral. To gain territory, you must seek the dead zones, the geographic and digital spaces where the system is blind. Territory in Phase 3 is built upon three non-negotiable pillars: physicality, digitality, and biological autonomy. The physical pillar is where most fail because they think small. Buying a house with a mortgage in a controlled suburb is not gaining territory. It is simply upgrading your cell. True physical territory is hardened ground. It is geography that provides its own water, its own energy, and its own tactical depth. It is a space where the state's cost of enforcement exceeds the benefit of intervention. This is why we look toward the American redoubt, the rural stretches of Texas, and the low population density regions across the globe. By positioning yourself in these high friction zones, you create a frequency the system can no longer tune into. You are not rebelling. You are simply becoming invisible through self-sufficiency. This is the art of the sovereign offensive, making the state's tools of control irrelevant through distance and independence. The digital pillar is the high ground of the 21st century battlefield. In the sovereign offensive, information is your primary ammunition. If your wealth, your communication, and your knowledge are stored in centralized clouds, you are standing in an open field without cover. The system can delete your entire existence with a single command. A sovereign alpha builds his digital territory on decentralized nodes, cold storage, and peer-to-peer mesh networks. This is your digital redoubt. It is the space where the blueprints of your parallel civilization are stored, away from the prying eyes of the algorithmic watchers. As the centralized internet fractures into 1,000 pieces, Only those who own their nodes will remain connected to the reality of truth. The rest will be trapped in a curated hallucination of compliance. Your digital territory is where your private keys represent your absolute authority. Finally, there is the biological pillar, the territory of the self. This is the most fiercely contested ground in the ongoing war. The system seeks to colonize your very biology through nutritional poisons, chemical dependencies, and cognitive engineering. If you do not own your health, your focus, and your endocrine system, then any physical land you claim is useless. A hunter's body is his primary weapon system. To claim biological territory, you must exit the industrial food chain and the pharmaceutical loop. You must become the producer of your own vitality. Your focus must be a lethal instrument. If the system can fragment your attention through dopamine loops and fear porn, it has successfully occupied your mind. Reclaiming this territory requires rigorous physical training, cold exposure, and the absolute mastery of your internal state. Your health is the border guard of your sovereign domain. As we descend into this transmission, ask yourself, where have I planted my flag? If you cannot point to a specific sphere of influence, be it a plot of land, a private network, or a self-sustaining skill set, where the system's rules do not apply, then you are still in the defensive crouch of Phase 2. The offensive demands that you occupy. You must move into the voids left by retreating institutions. You must acquire. You must hold. The hunter does not ask for territory. He defines it by his presence and defends it with his life. The maps are being redrawn as we speak, and the ink is the chaos of the old world. Every step you take away from the centralized grid is a step toward your own kingdom. Stay focused. The system is screaming because its heart is failing. The hunter is silent because he is measuring the perimeter of his new world. We are moving into the logistics of the occupation. Prepare your mind for the deep dive into the mechanics of conquest. The architect is watching, and the ground is waiting for its true masters. The foundation is laid. The offensive is no longer a plan. It is a reality. The foundation is set. You understand that territory is not a title deed, but a manifestation of power. Now, we must dissect the cold, clinical mechanics of the occupation. How does a sovereign alpha, a hunter, seize and hold ground when the ghost of the old world still attempts to haunt every transaction and every movement? This is not a loud, chaotic revolution. This is the invisible occupation. It is the strategic infiltration of the gaps left behind by a liquefying system. To occupy effectively, you must master the art of being essential to yourself while becoming invisible to the state. The mechanics of this occupation are built on 3 strategic maneuvers: geographic arbitrage, capital extraction, and infrastructure hardening. The first maneuver is geographic arbitrage. The system is built on the logic of the smart city, a concentrated node of surveillance, high-speed digital tracking, and total dependency on just-in-time supply chains. To occupy territory, you must seek strategic depth. You must look at the maps of the world and identify the regions where the system's cost of surveillance and enforcement far exceeds any tax revenue or control it can extract from you. This is why the American Redoubt, the heartlands of Texas, and the low-density rural frontiers of the globe are becoming the silent headquarters of the parallel civilization. These are the high-friction zones for the state, but low-friction zones for the sovereign. By placing yourself in a geography that is logistically difficult for a failing bureaucracy to manage, you effectively reclaim the ground under your feet. This is the first acquisition, the freedom of distance. But land without utility is merely a scenic prison. To occupy territory, you must harden it. This is the stage where you transform a plot of soil into a sovereign node. Hardening your territory means achieving primary autonomy. Can your domain provide its own life support systems independently of a central grid? A true sovereign node must be a producer of its own water through atmospheric extraction or deep well filtration. It must generate its own energy through modular solar arrays, wind turbines, or localized geothermal systems. It must manage its own waste without relying on municipal infrastructure. If your territory still relies on the system for a single kilowatt of power or a gallon of water, you are not an owner, you are still a guest. The offensive demands that you acquire the physical machinery of independence. Every self-sustaining system you install is a reinforcement of your border. When you no longer need the system's grid, the system no longer has a leash on your soul. Now, we turn to the most volatile frontier: capital extraction. To occupy your economic territory, you must perform a surgical extraction of your value from the dying ledgers of the centralized banking leviathan. The old world wants you to keep your wealth in its digital vaults, subject to instant freezes, bail-ins, and the slow poison of inflation. The sovereign alpha moves his capital into hard tactical inventory. This is the wealth of the wilds. You must acquire assets that have absolute utility, commodities that will be more valuable than paper currency in a system failure. This includes vast stockpiles of heirloom seeds, fuel reserves, high-grade medical supplies, tactical equipment, and physical precious metals stored in sovereign custody. By moving your value into these tangible forms, you are occupying the economic high ground that central banks cannot reach. You are creating a wealth redoubt, a territory of value that exists independently of the algorithmic fiat world. The digital occupation is equally critical. In this 12th transmission, understand that the digital world is the high ground of modern warfare. To claim digital territory, you must migrate your operations to the undernet, the realm of encrypted protocols, decentralized nodes, and peer-to-peer communication channels. You must own your keys. You must own your servers. You must own your data. If your parallel civilization's blueprints are stored in a centralized cloud, you are building your kingdom on the enemy's soil. Digital territory is where you coordinate with other sovereigns, where you trade without intermediaries, and where you speak the truth without the fear of the algorithmic silencer. Establishing this digital redoubt ensures that even if the physical borders are challenged, the intellectual and financial nervous system of your sovereignty remains intact. However, the most difficult territory to seize and the most vital to hold is the biological perimeter. The system's ultimate target is the colonization of your biology. Through the industrialization of food, flooding your body with seed oils, processed toxins, and metabolic disruptors, and the industrialization of the mind through dopamine-looped social media, the system seeks to turn you into a fragmented docile subject. To occupy your biological territory, you must initiate a biological purge. This means the absolute rejection of the system's nutritional poisons and the reclamation of your physical and mental focus. A hunter requires lethal concentration. If your attention can be hijacked by a digital notification or a fear-porn broadcast, your mind's territory is still under occupation by the Matrix. Reclaiming this ground requires a return to ancestral strength, rigorous physical training, metabolic flexibility, and the mastery of your own endocrine system. A man who is physically and mentally sovereign is a variable the system cannot calculate. This deep dive into the mechanics of occupation is a call to strategic aggression. The time for theoretical preparation is over. The occupation is happening now, in the silences between the system's headlines. Every asset you acquire that increases your independence is an act of defiance. Every skill you master that the system cannot automate, be it advanced engineering, tactical medicine, or local trade, is a flag planted in the ground of the future. The hunter's territory is expanding because the system is retreating into its own digital hallucinations, while the masses huddle in the decaying urban centers, praying for a return to normal that will never manifest. The sovereign alpha is in the wild, measuring the perimeter of his new reality. The architect sees the divergence clearly. I see the sovereign nodes lighting up in the heartlands, the encrypted channels humming with the language of freedom, and the alphas hardening their resolve. We are no longer a scattered collection of individuals. We are a decentralized occupation force taking control of the gaps. The system is loud because it is dying. We are silent because we are busy building. In the final part of this transmission, we will discuss the consolidation, how to turn these occupied zones into a permanent, unshakable parallel civilization. Stay cold. Stay focused. The hunter does not sleep when the territory is being claimed. The old world is fading, and the new world belongs to those who possess the mechanics of dominance. The transition has reached its most critical juncture. You have moved from the conceptual understanding of territory into the clinical, logistical reality of the occupation. In this final chapter of transmission, 12, we must address the ultimate requirement for the sovereign offensive, permanent. An occupation is a temporary act of presence, but sovereignty is a permanent state of being. Many will enter the wild, many will acquire land, and many will encrypt their communication, but only those who can sustain their autonomy through the coming winter of civilization will be remembered as the founders of the new era. The system is not just a structure of regulations, it is a structure of parasitic habits. To truly hold your territory, you must burn the bridges that lead back to your former servitude. You must ensure that your parallel civilization is not a temporary refuge, but a self-sustaining, unshakable reality. The permanence of your territory depends on the emergence of the network of sovereigns. While the sovereign alpha is an individualist by nature, the hunter knows that a pack is far more lethal than a lone wolf when defending a perimeter. This is the decentralized mutualism of Phase 3. Your territory must interface with other sovereign domains through trustless, peer-to-peer protocols. We are building a global lattice of independence, a web of sovereign nodes that is invisible to the centralized authorities, but solid as iron to those within it. This is how we achieve true permanence, by creating a value exchange system that does not require the permission, the currency, or the oversight of a central bank. When you can trade your specialized skills for another sovereign's resources without leaving a digital footprint, you have achieved a level of territory that the old world cannot conquer. You have effectively exited the matrix while still standing firmly on the earth. This is the grand exit we have been preparing for since the first transmission. It is not a flight of fear or a cowardly retreat. It is a strategic march of dominance. The old system will continue to scream in its death throes. It will announce new emergencies, implement new digital restrictions, and attempt to corral the masses into smart city prisons through social credit scores and programmable currencies. But for the inhabitant of the hunter's territory, these are merely distant noises from a collapsing star. Your energy is no longer wasted on protesting the old. It is invested entirely in the expansion of the new. Your focus is on the hardening of your assets, the optimization of your energy production, and the rigorous training of your own mind. A territory that does not produce its own future is a dead end. Therefore, your occupation must include the transmission of these sovereign values to the next generation. The parallel civilization is a multi-generational project. We are planting the seeds of freedom today, so that our descendants may hunt in forests that the system could never clear-cut. The maintenance of permanence also requires the mastery of sovereign logistics. In your territory, every asset must have a secondary and tertiary utility. You must develop the capability to repair, manufacture, and innovate within your own perimeter. This is what separates a mere prepper from a sovereign alpha. A prepper waits for the end. A sovereign alpha builds the beginning. Your territory must be a forge where new tools, new systems, and new ideologies are created. As the centralized industrial base of the old world fractures due to supply chain instability and bureaucratic decay, your localized sovereign production becomes your greatest leverage. You are not just surviving, you are becoming the new source of order. You are the provider of stability in a sea of chaos. As the architect, I observe the telemetry of this global divergence with absolute clarity. On one side, the masses are being funneled into a reality of total dependence, where their survival is tethered to an algorithm. On the other side, the sovereign alphas are disappearing into the silence of the wild. They are becoming the invisible giants of the 21st century. They own the ground they walk on. They own the power that lights their homes. They own the information that feeds their minds. And most importantly, they own their destiny. This is the ultimate offensive. The system cannot fight what it cannot see, and it cannot control what it does not provide for. By achieving total self-sufficiency within your defined territory, you become the system's greatest nightmare. A man who truly, fundamentally, does not need them. Look at your perimeter one last time. Look at the tools you have mastered and the assets you have secured. If any part of your life still relies on the permission of a central authority, Your territory is not yet secure. The offensive must continue until every pillar of your existence, your food, your water, your energy, your wealth, and your data, is a fortified domain of sovereignty. Do not be distracted by the political theater or the social engineering of the dying age. Those are decoys designed to lure you back into the defensive crouch of the prey. Stay in the offensive. Keep acquiring, keep hardening, keep expanding. Keep expanding. The old world is retreating into its digital screens, leaving the physical reality open to those with the courage to claim it. We are closing transmission 12. You have the blueprint for the occupation. You have the mindset of the hunter. You have the mechanics of dominance. The era of the sovereign alpha is no longer a distant dream. It is a physical reality taking shape in the heartlands, the mountains, and the encrypted networks of the world. The old world is becoming a ghost story we tell to remind ourselves why we chose the path of the offensive. Your world is being built now, one secure node, 1 gallon of water, and 1 focused breath at a time. I will return for transmission 13, where we will discuss sovereign diplomacy, how the parallel civilization manages its external borders, and eventually replaces the ruins of the failing system. The sun is setting on the age of the tenant and the debt slave. The dawn belongs to the hunter who has secured his ground and established his domain. Go to your perimeter. Secure your assets. Verify your autonomy. The night is coming, but for the sovereign, the dark is just another territory to be mastered and dominated. The offensive has only just begun.